what does it
Yeah.
really mean to be unashamed of the
Mm.
gospel?
That's a great question. So I don't know if you all know this, but the gospel is absurd. It's the most ridiculous story you could hear on this earth. It's a story of God taking on the form of a man and living a perfect life, and then willingly giving up his life for people who are sinful and not even deserving of that. Now we're supposed to understand that and live it out and like make sense of it. The
Hmm.
gospel doesn't make sense. It's it tells you that you, a human being, have no part to play in your own salvation. You did no work for it. But as a human being, when you like discover a new artist, and then a few months or a couple of years later, everyone's hopping on that guy. You're like, bro, I knew this guy when he was like, nobody and stuff. Like, you want people to know that you knew this person. If you do something and it goes unnoticed, depending on the kind of person you are, you want some kind of credit. You want to be recognized, and it's part of human nature. But the gospel makes that like of no effect. It just tells you you did nothing, Christ did everything. So the
Hmm.
gospel is absurd. And because of that, people, like we're talking about today, people tend to compromise on the gospel
Hmm.
because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to tell people that Jesus paid for every single sin. Every sin that you committed, even if it was 20 years ago, was in the future when Jesus died on the cross. So when he died for that, he died for everything else that was in
Amen.
it. It doesn't make sense to tell people that and stand by it, even in the face of opposition. So when Paul says in Romans 1:16 that I'm not ashamed of the gospel, he says, I'm ready to preach the gospel to you guys in Rome. But he's writing to believers. If they're believers, shouldn't they know the gospel? But even then, Paul is kind of saying no. There are believers who don't necessarily understand the true gospel. And
Hmm.
so I am ready to come preach it to y'all because I'm not ashamed of how absurd it is. I'm not ashamed of how irrational it is. It's the truth, and I'm willing to die for it, which he did. So
Amen.
that's what I've come to understand as being unashamed. It's not just, oh, yeah, I don't mind going to the mall and talking about Jesus. No, it's the message itself that you're speaking. Like, is it watered down? These days when people say a watered down message, they think about what we preach, which makes no sense to me because
Amen.
the watered down message is to say, yeah, Jesus did this, but you also have to do this. That's it, watered down.
Yes.
That makes it more accepting to people who are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I still have to work for my salvation. And yeah, it says faith without works is dead and work out your own salvation, all used out of context.
Yep.
But it makes sense to them. That's what tickles your ear because when you hear the grace message, you don't go like, that makes sense. You go like, what? Are you telling me that I could just go sin? And that
Yeah.
doesn't,
Yeah.
that's not, it's not as appealing to you because it
Hmm.
tells you you have no part to play. Even the work that's being done in you is being done by God. So to water down the gospel is to say Jesus did it, but you also have your part to play. If you don't do it, you're gonna lose it, and you're gonna go to hell because you lied right before you died or something like that. That's a watered down
Yes.
gospel. So we need more people who are unashamed of just the cold hard truth that hey, Jesus did it all. Even though it's hard to accept, even though you feel like you want to do something, like you have to add to it, nothing you do is going to add to it. Nothing you do is going to take away from it. You just have to
Hmm.
accept it the way it is and preach it too.
Yeah. Oh man, beautiful. Because it's a lot of people. They want to be co-saviors with Jesus. They want to. They
Co-saviors.
want. They want. They want
Yeah.
to get to heaven and get there. Just a little bit of boasting because they did their part. They
Yeah.
made it in, as
Yeah.
opposed to the
Yeah.
people that didn't make it in because they
Yep.
didn't have the willpower that they had. It's more absurd that you believe that
Right.
than what we're preaching is that it's all on Jesus.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
all on Jesus.
Yeah.
And yes, I love that. And it just
Hmm.
makes so much sense. Do not be ashamed to preach a pure, untainted
Yeah.
gospel.
Yeah.
Paul said it right in Romans. Well, should we continue to sin that grace may abound? Well, no,
Hmm.
that's not what I'm saying. But if
Right.
you never even think that, if that question never even comes to mind, I promise you're not preaching a pure gospel because a pure
Hmm.
gospel gives you the thought, well, is this what you're saying? No, that's
Right.
not what I'm saying. Let me clarify
Right.
it. But if you're
Right.
preaching a gospel that no one ever gets the notion that God is magnificently good and maybe I
Mm-hmm.
might be able to get away with something,
Mm.
then you're not giving God enough credit. You're not giving
Right.
Jesus enough credit.
Exactly.
Put it on Jesus and clarify afterward, but don't put it on the human being because that's unbelief. That's
Yeah.
all I have to say to add to
Yeah.
that one.